Pink Floyd had four completely different bands hiding in plain sight. Most fans think they know the story, but what if I told you the Pink Floyd that created Dark Side of the Moon was totally different from the one that made The Wall? And the original Pink Floyd? They would barely recognize what came after. In the next few minutes, we are revealing the four opposing identities of the world's most mysterious band, and the shocking truth about which version was the real Pink Floyd. Meet the Underground Experimenters, 1965 to 1968. Version 1 will blow your mind because this Pink Floyd was led by a genius who painted his fingernails and once showed up to a gig with a jar of Brill cream in his hair, playing slide guitar with it. Syd Barrett wasn't just Pink Floyd's leader, he was Pink Floyd.
Well, I wouldn't have existed if it hadn't been for Syd.
Picture this. Cambridge art students creating sounds that literally didn't exist before. Barrett would tune his guitar between songs, use echo chambers like instruments, and write lyrics that sounded like Alice in Wonderland on acid.
We would have been one of those thousands and thousands of bands who come up and they play blues and Louie Louie, and they might write the odd crappy song and then they disappear, and they get proper jobs, and that's the end of it.
Their first album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, was recorded in the same studio as the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's. But while the Beatles were perfecting pop, Pink Floyd was inventing space rock. Barrett's guitar work on Interstellar Overdrive used techniques that wouldn't become mainstream for another decade. But here's the tragic twist. Barrett's mind was fragmenting as fast as his music was evolving. By 1968, he'd become so unpredictable that the band hired David Gilmour just to cover for him when Barrett couldn't perform. Barrett's departure nearly killed Pink Floyd, but what happened next saved them and changed rock history forever. The Identity Seekers, 1968 to 1970. Version 2 was Pink Floyd's most dangerous period. They almost became a completely different band. With Barrett gone, Pink Floyd faced an existential crisis. David Gilmour joined, but nobody knew what Pink Floyd was supposed to sound like without their creative genius. They were four musicians pretending to be a band that no longer existed. This era produced their most experimental work. A saucerful of secrets and umaguma were Pink Floyd trying on different musical personalities like clothes. Roger Waters started writing more, but his concepts were still forming. Wright's keyboards became more atmospheric. Mason's drums got more complex. Here's what most fans miss. This wasn't Pink Floyd finding their sound. This was Pink Floyd creating their sound from scratch. Every weird experiment, every failed concept, every 20-minute instrumental was them building the foundation for what came next. But the real magic happened when they stopped trying to replace Barrett and started becoming something entirely new. And that brings us to the Pink Floyd that conquered the world. The Perfectionists, 1970 to 1979. Version 3 created the most successful album in rock history, and they almost broke up making it. This is the Pink Floyd you know. Waters' concepts, Gilmour's guitar mastery, Wright's atmospheric keyboards, Mason's rhythmic precision, four musicians operating as one creative mind. Metal through The Wall, 9 years of pure genius. But here's the secret. They weren't just making albums, they were creating experiences. Dark Side of the Moon wasn't recorded, it was constructed. Every heartbeat, every cash register ring, every spoken word was precisely placed. And about that biggest hit question, it wasn't Another Brick in the Wall or Comfortably Numb. Their biggest commercial success was Money from Dark Side, but their most important song was Shine on You, Crazy Diamond, their tribute to Barrett that proved they never forgot where they came from. But success bred conflict. By The Wall, Waters was essentially dictating every note. He'd become what Barrett never was, a musical dictator. The other members were session musicians in their own band. This tension exploded in the most dramatic band breakup in rock history. But here's the twist. It wasn't the end. It was transformation number 4. The Survivors, 1985 to 2014. Version 4 proved that Pink Floyd was bigger than any single member, even their main songwriter. When Roger Waters left in 1985, he made a bold claim. Pink Floyd is finished. He was spectacularly wrong. David Gilmour took control and proved something revolutionary. Pink Floyd wasn't Waters' vision brought to life by talented musicians. Pink Floyd was the sound created when these specific people played together. Waters had the concepts, but Gilmour had the soul. A momentary lapse of reason and The Division Bell showed a different Pink Floyd, less conceptual, more emotional.
We all knew that Roger was going to go. He wasn't happy. We weren't happy.
Gilmour's guitar became the storyteller. Wright's keyboards, freed from Waters' rigid structures, soared again.
I always knew we wanted to carry on. Nick seemed keen.
They weren't trying to recreate The Wall. They were discovering what Pink Floyd sounded like when it breathed freely.
I bumped into Rick in Greece on holiday that summer and talked to him about the possibility of carrying on. He was also very keen.
The proof? Their 1994 Division Bell tour was the highest-grossing rock tour in history at that time. Fans didn't come for nostalgia. They came because this version of Pink Floyd was still creating magic.
And we came up with a new vibe, a new feeling for the album. And it now has a slight more lightness of touch and a more timeless feel to it, I think.
And then came 2005. Live 8. One night only. All 4 surviving members on stage together for the first time in 24 years. 20 minutes that reminded the world why Pink Floyd was never just about any single member. But here's the ultimate question. Which version was the real Pink Floyd? The answer might surprise you. Here's the truth that took me years to understand. There was no real Pink Floyd. Each version was completely authentic to its moment. Barrett's chaos created the foundation. The transition period built the tools. The golden era perfected the craft. The survivors proved the legacy. Pink Floyd wasn't one band that changed. It was 4 different bands that happened to share a name. And that's exactly why they're immortal. They didn't just evolve, they reinvented the very concept of what a band could be. Which Pink Floyd speaks to your soul? Barrett's psychedelic chaos? Waters' conceptual perfection? Or Gilmour's emotional mastery? Drop your choice in the comments. I read every single one. And if this deep dive revealed something new about the band you thought you knew completely, smash that subscribe button.